It all begins, as so many grand tales do, with a party. A celebration that would echo through the ages. But this was no ordinary gathering, it was a wedding of cosmic significance, a union destined to shape the fate of gods and mortals alike. Thetis, a sea nymph renowned for her beauty and grace, was marrying Peleus, a mortal king chosen by the gods themselves. All the gods and goddesses of Olympus were invited to the celebration on Mount Pelion, a place where the divine and the earthly could meet. Nectar flowed, ambrosia piled high, and the muses sang their sweetest songs, filling the air with music and laughter. It was a rare moment of harmony between divine and mortal, a fleeting glimpse of peace in a world often ruled by chaos. But one goddess was left off the guest list, Eris, the infamous goddess of discord whose presence was feared by all. Inviting her would be like asking a pyromaniac to watch your fireworks. Her reputation for stirring up trouble was legendary. The organizers, hoping to keep the peace, made the fateful decision to exclude her, believing it was the safest choice. But Eris, not one to be ignored or slighted, decided to make her presence felt in a way no one would ever forget. She rolled a golden apple into the heart of the festivities, its surface gleaming and inscribed with the words, "For the fairest." Instantly, the music stopped and all eyes turned. Three goddesses lunged for the apple: Hera, queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, each certain it was meant for her. Each believed herself the rightful owner, and none was willing to back down. The air crackled with tension. The joyous celebration was shattered, replaced by suspicion and rivalry. The golden apple, a simple object, had become a grenade of jealousy, threatening to tear apart the fragile peace. The seeds of chaos were sown, and the fate of mortals and gods alike would soon be entangled in a web of envy and ambition. Eris vanished into the shadows, but her mischief lingered, casting a long and ominous shadow over the gathering. The goddesses demanded a judgment. Who was truly the fairest? The question hung in the air, impossible to ignore. The wedding feast, meant to unite two souls and two worlds, had instead become the spark for a legendary conflict that would echo through history. The gods looked to Zeus for a solution, but even the mighty king of the gods hesitated, knowing the consequences could be dire. The stage was set for a decision that would change the world, setting in motion events that no one could foresee, all because of one uninvited guest and a single golden apple, a moment of spite that would ignite a war and shape the destiny of heroes. Zeus, caught between three furious goddesses, found himself in an impossible position and needed a scapegoat to avoid their wrath. He chose Paris, a young prince of Troy who had been raised far from the palace, living as a humble shepherd because of a prophecy that he would one day bring ruin to his city. Paris was handsome, unassuming, and blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit him. His days were filled with the simple peace of tending sheep, never suspecting that the gods watched him from afar. Zeus sent Hermes, the swift-footed messenger, to deliver the golden apple, and a task no mortal could envy. Paris must judge which goddess was the fairest among them. The goddesses descended to Mount Ida, dazzling and intimidating in their divine beauty. Hermes explained the challenge, making it clear that Paris's decision would have consequences. Paris, terrified and overwhelmed by the presence of the immortals, tried to refuse, but there was no escape from a command of Zeus, king of the gods. In a single moment, Paris's quiet life ended. The world he knew was shattered, replaced by a burden he never asked for. He was now the judge in a contest that would decide not only the pride of goddesses, but the fate of gods and men alike. The gods had passed the burden to a mortal, and the world would soon feel the consequences of their choice. Paris stood alone, the golden apple in his hands, the eyes of Olympus upon him, his heart heavy with uncertainty. The fate of Troy, and the course of history itself, rested on his choice, a decision that would echo through the ages. Paris faced the three goddesses, each determined to win his favor and claim the title of the fairest. The air was thick with tension, as if the fate of the world hung on this single moment. They didn't rely on beauty alone, they offered bribes, each more dazzling and persuasive than the last, hoping to tip the scales in her favor. Hera, queen of the gods, promised Paris power, rule over all Asia and Europe, unimaginable wealth, and the world at his feet. She painted a vision of empires conquered and thrones bowed before him, a life of absolute authority. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, offered him glory, unmatched skill in battle, victory in every fight, and eternal fame as a hero. She spoke of legends sung for generations and the admiration of all Greece. Aphrodite, with a gentle smile, offered love, the most beautiful mortal woman in the world as his wife. She promised a passion that would outshine all others, a love story, to echo through eternity. Each offer was more tempting than the last: power, glory, or love. The gifts shimmered before Paris, each representing a different path, each with its own promise and peril. Paris was overwhelmed, his mind spinning with visions of kingship, heroism, and passion. The weight of the decision pressed upon him as if the gods themselves demanded an answer. The goddesses waited, each certain her gift would sway him. Their eyes never left Paris, their hopes and ambitions hanging in the balance. The contest was no longer about beauty, but about the deepest desires of the human heart: ambition, wisdom, and love, all vying for supremacy. Paris's decision would not only shape his own destiny, but the fate of nations. The world beyond Olympus waited, unaware that its future was being decided in this very moment. The bribes revealed the true stakes. This was a battle for the soul of a man, and the future of the world itself. The gods watched, knowing that whatever Paris chose, the consequences would be catastrophic, echoing through history and myth. The golden apple gleamed, a symbol of temptation and doom, its shine promising both wonder and disaster. Paris hesitated, torn between ambition, wisdom, and love. Every heartbeat brought him closer to a choice that would change everything. The world held its breath, suspended in anticipation, as if time itself had paused. The judgment was about to be made, and nothing would ever be the same again. Paris weighed the offers: power from Hera, glory from Athena, love from Aphrodite. Kingship and heroism dazzled him, but Aphrodite's promise of Helen, the world's most beautiful woman, captured his heart. In the end, Paris chose love over power and glory. He handed the golden apple to Aphrodite. Hera and Athena's fury was instant. Paris had made powerful enemies. The choice was personal, but its impact would be epic. The seeds of war were sown in a single passionate decision. Paris's judgment would echo through history. Aphrodite, triumphant, set out to fulfill her promise. The prize was Helen, Queen of Sparta, already married to King Menelaus. Helen's beauty was legendary, said to be divine, and had once drawn suitors from every corner of Greece. To prevent bloodshed, her father had made all suitors swear to defend her chosen husband. Guided by Aphrodite, Paris traveled to Sparta under the guise of diplomacy. Menelaus welcomed him, unaware of the danger. Paris and Helen met, and, with Aphrodite's influence, fell instantly in love. While Menelaus was away, Paris persuaded Helen to flee with him to Troy, taking treasure as well. Whether Helen went willingly or was abducted, poets still debate. The result was the same. Paris had stolen the Queen of Sparta. The oath of the suitors would soon turn a private scandal into a national crisis. The fuse was lit. War was inevitable. All for the promise of love. Menelaus returned to find Helen gone and his honor shattered. His rage was matched only by his sense of betrayal. He called upon his brother Agamemnon, the most powerful king in Greece. Agamemnon saw opportunity. Avenging Menelaus would unite Greece and bring glory, and perhaps riches, from Troy. The brothers invoked the oath sworn by Helen's former suitors. Kings and heroes from across Greece answered the call: Odysseus, Ajax, Diomedes, Nestor, and more. Even Achilles, hidden by his mother to avoid his fated death, was recruited by Odysseus's cunning. The greatest army ever assembled prepared for war. The abduction of a queen had become a cause for conquest. The stage was set for a conflict that would shape legends. The Greek host gathered, ready to sail for Troy. At Aulis, the Greek fleet, hundreds of ships, waited to sail for Troy, but the winds would not blow. Artemis was angered by Agamemnon's arrogance. The seer Calchas revealed the price. Agamemnon must sacrifice his daughter, Iphigenia. Torn between ambition and love, Agamemnon chose war. Iphigenia was brought to Aulis under false pretenses and sacrificed. The winds rose, and the fleet set sail. 1,000 ships crossed the sea, carrying heroes whose names would echo through time. The cost of war was already steep, innocent blood for a king's pride. The Greeks sailed toward destiny, vengeance, and glory. The siege of Troy would last 10 years, fueled by pride, desire, and fate. The world watched as legends were born. The greatest war of the ancient world had begun, all for the love of one woman. The Trojan War was more than a battle for a queen. It was a storm of pride, desire, and fate. The goddess's pride sparked the conflict. Mortal pride kept it burning. Paris's desire for Helen, Menelaus's for vengeance, Agamemnon's for power, each fueled the fire. Fate wove through every choice. Paris's prophecy, Achilles' destiny, the gods meddling. No one, mortal or divine, could escape the consequences. Pride blinded, desire consumed, and fate bound them all. The war was inevitable, a lesson in how flaws can shape history. Every hero and every god was caught in the web. The story endures because it is, at its heart, a tale of human weakness and destiny. The war's origins remind us, the smallest spark can ignite a world. The gods started the fire, but mortals kept it burning. And so began a war that would last 10 years and destroy a city, all from a single choice, a golden apple, a shepherd's judgment, and a goddess's promise. Paris's decision set in motion a chain of pride, passion, and vengeance. The abduction of Helen became the rallying cry for kings and heroes. The 1,000 ships sailed, and the world changed forever. The story of Troy is a warning. Small choices can have epic consequences. The gods may play, but it is mortals who pay the price. One apple, one judgment, and the world was set on fire. The Trojan War began not with armies clashing on the battlefield, but with a wedding, a celebration meant to unite, not divide. In the age of myth, even the most joyous occasions could become the spark for legendary conflict. It all started with a single act of spite, a moment of jealousy that would change the fate of nations. Eris, the goddess of discord, was not invited to the wedding of Thetis and Peleus. Furious at her exclusion, she crashed the festivities, tossing a golden apple inscribed for the fairest into the midst of the assembled goddesses, setting off a chain reaction of rivalry and resentment. Instantly, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claimed the apple, each convinced she alone deserved the title of the fairest. Zeus, king of the gods, wisely refused to judge such a dangerous contest. Instead, he appointed Paris, a young Trojan prince, to decide. Each goddess tried to sway Paris with tempting offers. Hera promised him power and dominion, Athena offered wisdom and victory in battle, and Aphrodite, goddess of love, promised Paris the heart of the world's most beautiful woman, a prize that would prove irresistible. Paris, swayed by desire, chose Aphrodite, handing her the golden apple and sealing the fate of his city and his people. The most beautiful woman in the world was Helen, already married to Menelaus, the powerful king of Sparta. Her beauty was legendary, said to rival that of the goddesses themselves. With Aphrodite's help, Paris seduced Helen and spirited her away from Sparta, taking not only the queen, but also much of the kingdom's treasure, and setting sail for Troy, under the cover of darkness. Menelaus, furious and humiliated, called upon his brother Agamemnon, the most powerful king in Greece, and summoned all of Helen's former suitors, who had once sworn a sacred oath to defend her marriage no matter the cost. Messengers rode across mountains and seas, summoning kings and heroes from every corner of the Greek world to honor their oath and join the cause. The abduction of Helen became more than a personal grievance. It was now a matter of honor, vengeance, and destiny for all of Greece. Ships were built and readied, armies gathered on the shores, and the greatest coalition in Greek history prepared to cross the sea to Troy. The theft of one queen would ignite a conflict that would echo through the ages, shaping legends and destinies for generations to come. High above, the gods watched, their own rivalries and grudges entwined with mortal affairs, knowing the seeds of destruction had been sown. And so, with the dawn, the war to reclaim Helen, and the honor of Greece, was about to begin, setting the stage for one of the greatest epics in human history. The Greek host assembled at Aulis, a force unmatched in legend. Never before had so many kingdoms united for a single cause, their banners fluttering in the morning breeze, their armor gleaming beneath the sun. Agamemnon led, joined by heroes like Odysseus, Ajax, Nestor, Diomedes, and Idomeneus. Each brought their own warriors, their own hopes and fears, forging uneasy alliances for the sake of Helen and honor. Hundreds of ships crowded the harbor, their prows pointed toward destiny. Yet, despite their readiness, the winds refused to blow, trapping the fleet in a tense and anxious limbo. The seer Calchas revealed Agamemnon had angered Artemis. Only the sacrifice of his daughter Iphigenia would appease her. The camp was gripped by dread, as the price of war became heartbreakingly clear. Agamemnon chose duty over family, and as Iphigenia died, the winds rose. The gods' will had been satisfied, but at a terrible cost, casting a shadow over the expedition before it even began. The fleet sailed to Troy, where King Priam and his sons prepared their defenses. The Trojans too were gathering allies, determined to protect their city and their honor. Troy's walls, said to be built by gods, loomed over the plain. Impenetrable and majestic, they promised a long and bitter struggle for any who dared attack. The Greeks landed, building a camp on the shore, home for what would become a decade-long siege. Their hopes for a swift victory faded as the days stretched into years. The war began not with a swift victory, but with the grim realization that Troy would not fall easily. Both sides braced for hardship, knowing that glory and ruin walked hand in hand. The gods, whose quarrels had started it all, continued to meddle. Their rivalries and whims shaped the fate of mortals, turning the battlefield into a stage for divine drama. The Greeks and Trojans braced for a conflict that would test their strength, patience, and resolve. Every man knew he might become a legend, or a casualty. The stage was set for heroes and tragedy. Songs would be sung of their deeds, and the world would never forget the price paid at Troy. The greatest war of myth had begun. Swords clashed, shields splintered, and destinies were forged in fire and blood. The fate of Troy and all who fought hung in the balance as the world watched and the gods looked on. Among the Greeks, two warriors stood above the rest, Achilles and Ajax. Achilles, son of Thetis, was nearly invincible, save for his heel, and unmatched in speed and ferocity. He chose a short, glorious life at Troy over obscurity at home, leading his Myrmidons with unstoppable force. Ajax, by contrast, was a giant fortress of a man, wielding a massive shield and standing immovable in battle. Where Achilles was a spear, Ajax was a shield. Together, they were the Greeks' greatest hope. Achilles broke enemy lines. Ajax held them. Ajax's duel with Hector lasted a day, ending only at nightfall. Achilles' pride and Ajax's steadfastness became the pillars of Greek strength. Their rivalry and partnership shaped the war's course. In their shadows, lesser men became legends or casualties. Troy's hope rested on Hector, eldest son of Priam and champion of the city. Unlike Achilles, Hector fought not for glory but for family and homeland. He was a devoted husband and father, beloved by his people. Hector's courage and leadership inspired the Trojans to resist, even as the Greeks pressed hard. He dueled the best of the Greeks, holding the line when others faltered. Privately, Hector doubted the war's cause, but his sense of duty was unshakable. His humanity shone in moments with his wife and son, knowing each battle could be his last. Hector's burden was heavy. He fought for a city he feared could not be saved. He was the heart of Troy's resistance, a tragic hero bound by honor. As long as Hector stood, Troy endured. His fate would decide the city's own. The Trojan War was as much a contest of gods as of men. Hera, Athena, and Poseidon aided the Greeks, seeking Troy's destruction. Aphrodite, Apollo, and Ares fought for the Trojans, each with their own motives. The gods intervened openly, saving favorites, turning battles, and even fighting alongside mortals. Athena guided Greek spears, Apollo unleashed plagues, Aphrodite whisked Paris from danger. The battlefield became a chessboard for divine rivalries. Even Zeus, striving for neutrality, could not resist tipping the scales. Mortal fates shifted on a god's whim. The war's outcome was shaped as much by Olympus as by human valor. In this war, men were pawns in a cosmic game. The war dragged on for 9 grinding years. Troy's walls held firm. The Greeks could not break through. The Greeks raided nearby lands for supplies, but the city itself remained unbroken. Life in the Greek camp was harsh, homesick, quarrelsome, and plagued by disease. The Trojans endured constant siege, their hopes pinned on allies and dwindling stores. Both sides suffered, morale eroded, and the war became a test of endurance. Children grew up knowing only conflict. Heroes fell in forgotten skirmishes. The initial fire of vengeance faded, replaced by weary determination. The war became a monstrous burden, consuming a generation. Victory seemed as distant as ever. In the war's final year, pride and grief changed everything. Agamemnon insulted Achilles by taking Briseis, sparking Achilles' furious withdrawal from battle. Without Achilles, the Greeks faltered. Hector led the Trojans to the brink of victory. Desperate, Achilles' friend Patroclus donned his armor and led the Myrmidons, driving back the Trojans. Patroclus, ignoring Achilles' warning, was killed by Hector at Troy's walls. Achilles' grief turned to wrath. He rejoined the war, seeking vengeance. The death of Patroclus shattered Achilles' pride, fueling a rage that would change the war's course. The Greeks regained hope, the Trojans braced for retribution. The stage was set for the war's bloodiest chapter. Achilles' return would decide the fate of heroes and city alike. Achilles' rage unleashed a storm upon Troy. Armed with new divine armor, he tore through Trojan ranks, unstoppable and merciless. Hector alone stood to face him, bound by honor to defend his city. Their duel was swift and fatal. Achilles killed Hector, sealing Troy's doom. In his fury, Achilles desecrated Hector's body, dragging it before Troy's walls. King Priam, in a moment of courage and grief, begged Achilles for his son's body. Achilles, moved by Priam's plea, relented, and a brief peace settled over the plain. But the war's toll mounted. Achilles was soon killed by Paris, guided by Apollo's hand. Ajax, denied Achilles' armor, fell to madness and took his own life. The greatest heroes perished, one by one. The war's end drew near, but at a terrible cost. Troy's fate was sealed. The age of heroes was ending. The plain ran red with the blood of legends. With heroes fallen and the war deadlocked, the fields around Troy were littered with the memories of countless battles. Both sides had suffered unimaginable losses, and hope seemed to fade with each passing day. The Greeks, weary and desperate, knew that brute force alone would never breach Troy's mighty walls. In this moment of despair, Odysseus, famed for his cunning, devised a final gambit, the Trojan horse. It was a plan born not of strength, but of wit and deception. The Greeks feigned retreat, leaving behind a giant wooden horse as an offering to Athena, goddess of wisdom and war. The horse stood as a symbol of surrender, a gift meant to appease the gods and the Trojans alike. But hidden within its hollow belly, Odysseus and a select band of warriors waited in silence, their fate tied to the success of this daring ruse. Meanwhile, the rest of the Greek army sailed away, disappearing beyond the horizon. The Trojans, believing the war finally over, brought the horse inside their walls. Joy swept through the city as they celebrated what they thought was a miraculous victory and the end of a decade-long siege. But as night fell and the city slept, the Greeks emerged from the horse, silent as shadows. They crept through the darkened streets, opening the gates to their waiting comrades, who had secretly returned under cover of darkness. Troy was caught unprepared. The city was sacked in a night of horror and chaos. Flames devoured palaces and homes, and the cries of the vanquished echoed through the streets. Men, women, and children were slaughtered without mercy. King Priam, the heart of Troy, was killed at his own altar, a symbol of the city's utter defeat. The city burned for days, its people either enslaved or slain. The proud civilization of Troy was reduced to ashes and sorrow. The Greeks had won, but their victory was hollow. The horrors they unleashed would haunt them for the rest of their lives, and the cost of their triumph weighed heavily on their souls. The gods, angered by the Greeks' brutality and sacrilege, cursed their homecomings. Many would face storms, shipwrecks, and endless wandering, punished for their pride and cruelty. Troy's fall became legend, a warning to all of the dangers of pride, vengeance, and the wrath of the divine. Its story would echo through the ages, retold by poets and storytellers. The war ended not in glory, but in ashes and ruin. The dreams of both victors and vanquished were lost to the flames. The story of Troy endures as a timeless tragedy, a monument to the cost of war and the fragility of human greatness. Even the greatest heroes could not escape the ruin of war, and their legacy is a somber reminder of the price of ambition and the sorrow of lost glory. For 10 long years the armies of Greece laid siege to Troy, a proud and wealthy city across the restless Aegean Sea. The world watched as two civilizations clashed, locked in a struggle that seemed to have no end. This was a war for honor and pride, ignited when Paris of Troy stole away Helen, the beautiful wife of a powerful Greek king. Her abduction was more than a personal insult, it was a spark that set the world ablaze. The Greeks sailed across the sea to reclaim her, bringing with them 1,000 ships, and their greatest heroes, warriors whose names would echo through history. Battles raged on the dusty plains, heroes fell in single combat, and even the gods themselves chose sides, their rivalries shaping the fate of mortals below. Yet after a decade of bloodshed and sacrifice, nothing had truly changed. The war dragged on, day after day, year after year. The Greeks camped on the windswept beaches, their ships pulled ashore, unable to breach Troy's mighty walls no matter how hard they tried. The Trojans, safe behind their towering fortifications, could not drive the invaders away, trapped as much as their enemies. Both armies were exhausted, their spirits worn thin, longing for home and peace, yet unable to escape the endless stalemate. The fields outside Troy lay empty and ruined, families suffered in silence, and hope faded with each passing season. The Greek camp became a city of exiles, a place of longing and frustration. The Trojans, meanwhile, were prisoners in their own home, always watching, always waiting. Supplies dwindled, hunger gnawed at both armies, and the fire of war became a slow, grinding ache that would not end. The Greeks tried everything, sieges, battles, duels, and cunning assaults, but Troy's walls stood firm, brute force had failed, and hope was slipping away. The war demanded a new kind of thinking, a strategy that went beyond strength and courage. Something had to break the endless cycle, to shatter the deadlock that held both sides captive. The Greeks needed a plan so clever, so unexpected, it would change the course of history and bring the war to an end. The story of Troy became legend, a tale of courage, loss, and the limits of human endurance, told and retold for generations. It was no longer just a war of armies. It was a test of will, of patience, and of ingenuity. The Greeks faced a simple, impossible problem: how to conquer a city they could not reach, a fortress that seemed invincible. The answer would come not from strength, but from cunning, a solution born from desperation and imagination. The fate of Troy would be decided by a single, audacious idea, one that would echo through the ages as a symbol of both genius and deception. The world was about to witness a deception for the ages, a trick so bold it would become legend. The end of the war was near, and the fate of Troy would soon be sealed forever. Troy's walls were legendary, said to be built by the gods themselves. Tall, thick, and perfectly fitted, they made the city a fortress. Greek assaults, siege towers, battering rams, were all repelled by Trojan ingenuity. The defenders fought with the desperation of men protecting their homes. Every attack failed. Morale in the Greek camp plummeted. Even their greatest heroes had fallen, and the army grew weaker. The Greeks faced a city they could not breach, and leaders like Agamemnon and Odysseus knew time was running out. The Trojans simply waited behind their walls, safe and patient. The Greeks needed a way inside, without force. The war had become a test of wits, not strength. Only a trick could bring Troy down. The Greeks had to make the Trojans open their own gates. The stage was set for a legendary deception. In the Greek camp, hope was fading, until Odysseus spoke. The long years of siege had worn down even the bravest hearts, and the soldiers' faces were etched with exhaustion and doubt. Known for his cunning and quick mind, Odysseus proposed a radical plan, one that would rely not on brute force, but on cleverness. He suggested they trick the Trojans into opening their gates, ending the stalemate in a way no one expected. The Greeks would pretend to give up, pack their camp, and sail away, leaving behind only silence and the illusion of defeat. But they'd leave behind a gift, a giant wooden horse, crafted with care as an offering to the gods, a symbol of surrender and peace. The Trojans, believing the war was finally over, would bring the horse inside their walls as a trophy, celebrating what they thought was their victory. Hidden inside the horse, Odysseus and a select group of warriors would wait in silence, their fate tied to the success of the ruse. While the Greek fleet hid just out of sight, these men would be carried into the very heart of Troy, closer than any Greek had come in years. It was a plan of deception, not battle, a gamble that would test their courage and resolve. The leaders agreed. After 10 long years, they had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain if the plan succeeded. The fate of the war and the destiny of both peoples would rest on this single, daring gamble. The Greeks would risk everything on a trick, placing their trust in Odysseus's bold idea. If it failed, all was lost: their hopes, their lives, and their chance for victory. But if it worked, Troy would fall from within, and the Greeks would finally see the end of their long struggle. The plan was set in motion, every detail carefully arranged as dawn broke over the camp. The greatest trick in history was about to begin, and the world would never be the same. The Greeks prepared for their final move, hearts pounding with anticipation and fear, as the fate of Troy hung in the balance. The Greeks chose Achilles, a master craftsman, to build the horse. Guided by Odysseus and Athena, he constructed a massive, hollow wooden horse from ship planks and sacred timber. It was so large it couldn't fit through Troy's gates, by design. The Greeks wanted the Trojans to break their own walls to bring it inside. As the horse neared completion, the Greeks staged their retreat. They burned tents, packed ships, and sailed away, leaving the horse on the shore. To the Trojans, it looked like defeat. But the Greek fleet hid behind the island of Tenedos, waiting. Inside the horse, 30 elite warriors prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives: the empty beach, the silent horse. Everything was part of the ruse. The Greeks' fate now rested on their deception. The Trojans would soon discover the mysterious gift. The first act of Odysseus's plan was complete. The war's end was set in motion. All eyes turned to Troy. At dawn, Trojan scouts found the Greek camp deserted. The once bustling enemy tents now stood eerily empty, with only the faint traces of last night's fires left behind. The Trojans, who had endured years of siege, could hardly believe their eyes. The city erupted in celebration. The war was over. Joy swept through the streets as families embraced, and the people of Troy poured out of their homes to rejoice together. For the first time in a decade, hope filled the air. On the beach stood the enormous wooden horse, inscribed as an offering to Athena. Its size and craftsmanship amazed everyone, and its presence seemed both mysterious and magnificent. Most Trojans saw it as a victory trophy, a symbol of their triumph, but not all were convinced. Whispers of doubt spread among the elders and the wise. The priest Laocoon warned, "I fear the Greeks, even when they bring gifts." His voice echoed across the crowd, urging caution in the midst of celebration. He hurled his spear at the horse, revealing its hollow sound. The sharp clang rang out, raising uneasy murmurs among the onlookers. Suddenly, 2 sea serpents emerged from the sea and killed Laocoon and his sons in a terrifying spectacle. The crowd recoiled in horror at the sight. The Trojans saw this as a sign from the gods. Laocoon had been punished for doubting the gift. All suspicion vanished, replaced by awe and fear of divine will. The Trojans decided to bring the horse into their city, convinced it would bring them favor from Athena and secure their victory. The horse was too large for the gates, so they tore down part of their own wall. The city's defenses were sacrificed for what they believed was a sacred gift. With ropes and cheers, they dragged the horse inside. The people watched in wonder as the massive structure entered the heart of Troy. The city celebrated, believing they had won. Music and laughter filled the night, and the Trojans felt safe at last. The Greeks' deception had worked perfectly. Hidden inside the horse, their best warriors waited for the right moment. The fate of Troy was sealed. Unbeknownst to the revelers, danger lurked within their very walls. The greatest danger now stood at the heart of the city, disguised as a gift. The final act was about to begin, and Troy's destiny would soon be decided. With the horse inside Troy, the city erupted in wild celebration. After years of fear, the Trojans feasted, sang and danced, believing the war was over. The horse was decorated with flowers, a monument to their supposed victory. Guards relaxed, weapons were set aside, and no one watched the walls. Hidden inside the horse, Odysseus and his men waited in silence, listening to the revelry. They knew discovery meant death, but they remained still, waiting for nightfall. As the city drank and rejoiced, their defenses vanished. The Trojans, exhausted and drunk, finally stumbled home. The city fell into a deep, unguarded sleep. The Greeks inside the horse prepared for their moment. Outside, the Greek fleet waited for the signal. The trap was set. Troy was more vulnerable than ever. The fate of the city hung by a thread. The final phase of the plan was about to unfold. In the dead of night, Greek spy Sinon lit a signal fire on the beach. The hidden Greek fleet saw the flame and silently rowed back to Troy. Inside the horse, Odysseus gave the signal. A hatch opened, and the hidden warriors climbed down into the sleeping city. Moving like shadows, they made for the main gates. The few guards were quickly dispatched. The Greeks unbarred the gates, swinging them wide. Outside, thousands of Greek soldiers poured ashore, ready for battle. The Trojans, deep in drunken sleep, had no idea their doom was at hand. The Greeks had turned Troy's strength into its greatest weakness. The city was defenseless, its gates open to the enemy. The plan had worked flawlessly. The final assault was about to begin. Troy's fate was sealed by its own hands. The end was near. The Greek army flooded into Troy, silent and deadly. For 10 years, they'd waited for this moment. Now their fury was unleashed. They split into groups, setting fire to homes and cutting down any who resisted. The city awoke to chaos, flames, screams, and the clash of steel. The Trojans, caught off guard, tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. King Priam was killed in his palace. The royal family fell. The city's defense collapsed into panic. The Greeks showed no mercy, erasing Troy from the earth. The proud city was reduced to ruins in a single night. The war ended not with a battle, but with annihilation. Troy's mighty walls had meant nothing in the end. The Greeks' cunning had triumphed over strength. The legend of the Trojan horse was born in fire and blood. Troy was no more. At dawn, Troy was a smoldering ruin. The war was over, but victory came at a terrible cost. The Greeks had won through deception, not glory. Troy's treasures were looted, its people enslaved, its walls broken. The story of the Trojan horse became a timeless warning: beware of gifts from your enemies. The phrase Trojan horse still means hidden danger today. The fall of Troy marked the end of an era of heroes. Survivors like Odysseus began their own legendary journeys home. The destruction of Troy was a lesson in pride and overconfidence. The Trojans celebrated too soon, and in their joy, sealed their fate. The tale endures as a story of war, human nature, and the power of cunning. Even the strongest defenses can be undone from within. The Greeks did not win by force, but by wit. A single idea ended a decade of war and brought a city to its knees. The legend of Troy lives on, a warning and a testament to the power of deception. For 10 long years, the city of Troy had been engulfed in the relentless chaos of war. The clash of swords, the cries of warriors, and the thunder of chariots had become the city's constant companions. But now, as the first light of dawn crept over the battered walls, an eerie silence settled over the land. The Trojans, weary and battered, emerged from their homes to find the battlefield deserted, the air heavy with uncertainty, and the ghosts of countless battles. The Greek encampment, once bustling with life and the sounds of preparation, was now empty. Not a single enemy remained. In their place, standing alone on the windswept shore, was a colossal wooden horse, its size and craftsmanship both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. The horse loomed as a silent sentinel, its presence a riddle left behind by the vanished Greeks. The Trojans gathered in anxious clusters, their voices hushed and urgent. Some argued that the horse was a trick, a final act of cunning from their relentless foes. Others wondered if it was a peace offering, a symbol that the gods had finally granted them victory. The debate grew heated, suspicion and hope mingling in every word. Many believed the horse to be a sacred gift to Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. Perhaps, they reasoned, the Greeks had left it behind to appease her, hoping for safe passage home. The sight of the horse, so grand and mysterious, stirred both reverence and fear in the hearts of the people. Yet not all were convinced. Laocoon, the wise and respected priest, stepped forward, his voice ringing with warning. "I fear the Greeks, even when they bring gifts," he declared, urging the crowd to beware. To prove his suspicion, he struck the wooden horse with his spear, and the hollow echo that followed sent a chill through those gathered. The horse was not solid, it concealed something within. Suddenly the sea roared with unnatural fury. From the churning waves, two monstrous serpents emerged, their scales glistening in the morning light. With terrifying speed, they attacked Laocoon and his sons, crushing them in their coils, before vanishing beneath the waves. The Trojans watched in horror, convinced that this was a sign from the gods, a dreadful punishment for doubting the sacred gift. Shaken by the omen, the Trojans' fear turned to conviction. They believed the gods had spoken and that to reject the horse would bring even greater disaster. With heavy hearts and trembling hands, they prepared to bring the mysterious gift into their city, hoping to appease Athena and secure their safety. In their eagerness, the Trojans dismantled their own mighty gates, breaking the very walls that had protected them for a decade. With cheers and songs, they dragged the enormous horse through the streets, believing that their suffering had finally ended and that peace was at hand. That night, the city erupted in celebration. Feasts were held in every home, music and laughter filled the air, and the people of Troy rejoiced as never before. They sang songs of victory, toasted to the future, and embraced one another, certain that the long nightmare of war was finally over. As darkness fell, the city grew quiet. Families slept soundly for the first time in years, their dreams filled with hope and relief. The streets were peaceful, the air gentle and still. Troy, at last, believed itself safe from harm, yet beneath the surface of their joy, a shadow lingered. The wooden horse stood silent and watchful, its secret hidden deep within. The Trojans' triumph, born of hope and desperation, would soon reveal itself as a fatal mistake, one that would change the fate of Troy forever. As the city of Troy lay shrouded in darkness, its people finally at rest after years of siege, the massive wooden horse stood silent in the city's heart. Unbeknownst to the Trojans, the horse was no gift, but a vessel of doom. As midnight deepened, the belly of the horse creaked open, its hidden compartment releasing shadows into the night. Greek warriors, led by the cunning Odysseus, slipped out one by one, their hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. Moving like ghosts, they crept through the sleeping city, blades drawn, every step bringing them closer to their long-awaited revenge. They found the sentries who never suspected betrayal from within their own walls, and killed them swiftly and silently. With the guards dead, the Greeks hurried to the city gates. Working quickly, they unbarred the massive doors and swung them open, signaling to the waiting Greek army outside. The soldiers who had waited for so many years surged forward, pouring into the city like a flood. The city awoke not to the promise of peace, but to the nightmare of fire, chaos, and slaughter. Flames leapt from rooftops as the Greeks set buildings alight, and the screams of the innocent filled the air. Panic spread like wildfire as the Trojans realized their doom. The Greeks, driven by 10 years of rage and grief, unleashed their fury in a single, merciless night. They burned homes, toppled statues, and killed without hesitation, their vengeance knowing no bounds. The city that had withstood a decade of siege now fell in hours. The Trojans, unarmed and hopelessly outnumbered, were slaughtered in their own streets. Fathers fell, trying to protect their children. Mothers wept as they were torn from their loved ones, and the city's defenders were cut down where they stood. Even the sacred places offered no refuge. Temples became slaughterhouses, their sanctity violated as priests were murdered at their own altars. The gods of Troy, once honored with prayers and offerings, were powerless to stop the carnage. The city's treasures, collected over generations, were plundered by the invaders. Gold, jewels, and sacred relics were seized as prizes of war. What could not be carried away was smashed or set ablaze, erasing Troy's legacy in a single night. By dawn, Troy was nothing but a smoldering ruin. The proud city, once the envy of the world, was reduced to ashes. Its people were dead, enslaved, or scattered, their lives and dreams destroyed. The war that had raged for a decade was finally over. The Greeks had won, but at a terrible cost. But the victory was soaked in horror. The conquerors, too, were haunted by what they had done, their triumph forever stained by the memory of that night. Troy, once a jewel of the world, was gone. Its glory extinguished, its people lost to history, and its story forever marked by tragedy and loss. In the burning palace, where once laughter and music echoed through grand halls, only the roar of flames and the crash of falling stone could be heard. The night sky glowed red, casting flickering shadows on the shattered columns and broken statues that had witnessed centuries of royal triumphs and tragedies. King Priam, the last hope of Troy's ancient line, made his final desperate stand amid the chaos. His regal bearing, once a symbol of Troy's strength, now seemed fragile against the overwhelming destruction. Yet even as the world he knew crumbled around him, he refused to abandon his dignity or his people. In a moment of unbearable agony, Priam watched his beloved son Polites cut down before his very eyes. The king's cries echoed through the ruined halls, a father's grief mingling with the terror of a city in its death throes. The loss was not just personal, it was the shattering of Troy's future. Dragged mercilessly to the altar where he had once prayed for his city's safety, Priam was murdered by Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles. The sacred place became a scene of horror, the king's blood staining the stones that had seen generations crowned and mourned. The royal family was wiped out, no sons left to seek revenge, no daughters to carry on the name, no hope for Troy's future. The palace, once filled with the bustle of courtiers and the laughter of children, now stood silent and empty, haunted by memories of what was lost. The most brutal act of all was yet to come. Hector's young son, Astyanax, innocent and unaware of the hatred that surrounded him, was seized by the Greeks and thrown from the towering city walls. With his death, the last hope for Troy's royal bloodline was extinguished. The Greeks ensured that Troy's royal line was utterly destroyed. Their vengeance was not satisfied with victory alone. They sought to erase every trace of the dynasty that had defied them for so long. This was not just defeat, but annihilation. The city's proud towers were reduced to rubble, its temples desecrated, its people scattered or slain. The destruction was so complete that even the memory of Troy seemed destined to fade into legend. The house of Priam, rulers for generations, was erased in a single night. Statues toppled, treasures looted, and the royal lineage snuffed out as if it had never existed. The legacy of a once great dynasty was reduced to dust and silence. The king died at his own altar, his family slaughtered around him, the palace that had been his life's work now a tomb for all he loved. The echoes of their tragedy would haunt the ruins for centuries to come. The Greeks wanted not just victory but the end of Troy's legacy. Their triumph was a warning to all who might defy them, a display of power and ruthlessness that would be remembered in myth and song. Their triumph was total and merciless. No mercy was shown, no quarter given. The city's conquerors marched through the flames, their victory complete, their enemies utterly vanquished. Troy's dynasty was gone forever. The royal chambers, once alive with intrigue and ambition, now lay in ruins, open to the sky and the elements, their secrets lost to time. Only ashes and sorrow remained, drifting through the empty halls and broken courtyards. The story of Troy's fall would echo through history, a somber reminder of how even the greatest dynasties can be reduced to nothing but dust and memory. The women of Troy faced a fate worse than death: enslavement. Queen Hecuba, once a queen and mother, became Odysseus's slave, her grief transforming her into a living symbol of loss. Cassandra, cursed to see the future but never believed, was given to Agamemnon, knowing she would die in a foreign land. Andromache, Hector's widow, lost her son and was handed to Neoptolemus. Even Helen, the war's cause, was reclaimed by Menelaus, not as a queen, but as a bitter trophy. The women were stripped of everything: home, family, freedom. Their suffering was a slow, endless punishment. Their laments echoed long after Troy's fires died. In war, the survivor's pain is the cruelest legacy. With Troy in ruins, the Greeks prepared to sail home, their ships heavy with treasure and captives. There was no joy, only exhaustion and bitterness. The leaders quarreled over the spoils and the timing of their departure. Agamemnon insisted on sacrifices to appease Athena, whose temple had been desecrated. The gods were furious at the Greeks' arrogance and sacrilege. As the fleet set sail, a sense of dread hung over them. Their victory felt hollow, their souls stained by what they had done. They had destroyed Troy but lost a part of themselves. The war was over, but their troubles were just beginning. The gods would demand a heavy price. The gods' wrath struck swiftly. As the Greek fleet sailed, Poseidon unleashed a monstrous storm at Athena's urging. Ships were shattered, men drowned, and treasures lost to the sea. Ajax the Lesser, who had defied the gods, was drowned by Poseidon himself. The Greeks, once mighty, were scattered and broken. Many never saw home again. The journey that should have been a triumph became a nightmare. The gods made it clear: no one escapes punishment for arrogance and sacrilege. The Greeks had won the war, but lost the favor of Olympus. Their homecoming was a curse, not a celebration. Agamemnon, king of kings, survived the storms and returned to Mycenae expecting glory. But his wife, Clytemnestra, had never forgiven him for sacrificing their daughter. She and her lover, Aegisthus, plotted revenge. Agamemnon entered his palace blinded by pride, ignoring Cassandra's warnings. Inside, Clytemnestra trapped him and killed him in his bath, avenging their daughter. Cassandra was murdered as well. The conqueror of Troy died not as a hero, but as a victim of his own family. His victory brought only blood and betrayal. The king's homecoming lasted mere hours. Glory turned to tragedy in his own house. Odysseus, architect of Troy's fall, faced a decade of suffering on his journey home. Poseidon's wrath drove him into storms, monsters, and endless trials. He lost all his ships, treasure, and companions. Only his longing for home kept him going. After 20 years he returned to Ithaca as a beggar, his palace overrun by suitors. He fought one last battle to reclaim his home and family. Odysseus's victory at Troy cost him everything. His story is the ultimate cursed triumph. When the dust settled, one truth was clear: there were no winners at Troy. The Trojans lost their city, their people, their future. The Greeks, though victorious, suffered loss, betrayal, and endless punishment. The gods ensured that no one escaped the consequences of war and hubris. The glory of battle turned to ash for all. The Trojan War is a warning, not a celebration. War destroys victors and vanquished alike. In the end, only sorrow prevails. The true victor of Troy was tragedy itself.